Good afternoon, everybody, and we apologize for the late start. Our guest, our speaker here, John, had to drive one exam. I guess he was on the traffic. First, I'm Khalid Safouri. I'm the president of National Justice Foundation. I would like to thank you and welcome you for coming here. I know many people are hesitant to gather in lectures in person because of COVID. So we have a stream on YouTube, on our channel YouTube, where people are following us. We have a special guest today. This is the second time Jafar joined us to speak. I'll give you just a short background. Many people don't know when Israel was created in 1948. They forced Palestinians out of their homes with all kinds of threats and massacres and killing. And few number of Palestinians stayed. Now their numbers are in the excess of 1.5 million. Many people think that Palestinians in Israel are treated equally by Israel, but look at how, if anyone travels, they just go to the Arab areas or Palestinian areas in Israel, you see the discrimination, the infrastructure, on the spending. As a matter of fact, a few years ago, some members of Congress tried to introduce legislation. Of course, they failed because of AIPAC's objection that asked that U.S. foreign aid to Israel, which is in the excess of $3.8 billion, be distributed without discrimination. So no one knows about the situation of the Palestinians under Israel more than Jafar. He has an organization called Musawa. Musawa in Arabic means equality, and this is what they are struggling to get, this equality, to be treated equal to Jews. Many people don't know. I mean, they have the right to vote and they have members in the Israeli Knesset, but the other class of citizens are the Palestinians of the West Bank and Gaza who have no votes or nothing. And Israel builds even discrimination that is more clear and stronger. They have roads and freeways, they call it Turuq al-Tifafiyya, that only the Palestinians cannot use. They're not allowed to use. If they dare get into these roads, they will be arrested and get tickets. Anyway, Jafar will tell us about the form of discrimination. There's something I was reading early this morning in the Haaretz Israeli paper. It says Arabs demonstrate, it's a riot. When settlers rampage through Palestinian villages in the West Bank, it's called clashes. And this is exactly how the manipulation of the truth and how we turn this job.
Thank you, Khalid. And again, I would like to apologize for being late. It's a very busy day, actually, today. Finally, we have some meetings also with members of Congress and senators. We will have today and tomorrow some meetings here. We are actually here to present the status and the reality that the Palestinian Arab minority in Israel face since 48, but also in certain point, I would like to share with you also how we see the future and how we would like to design the future as actors and active actors on the Palestinian-Israeli reality. So it's not the first time that Khalid, you hosted us, and I think it's part of partnership that we are creating with American civil society, Arab American civil society organizations like you, the ABC, and other Arab American organizations. And we are happy that we are able to be partners of you on the ground, because you know the reality here much better than us. We are coming, at least on my case, my colleague Soha, she has actually living in New York, and we have friends of Musawa here finally, that we try to promote the status and the issues related to the Palestinian Arab community in Israel. So we are happy to have this partnership, and we hope that we will be able to strengthen this partnership with other communities also, that are politically active and put their needs and demands on the table. The Palestinian community in Israel is about today, we are about 2 million people. It's very complicated to have the final number, because since the Israeli government and the Israeli Knesset annexed East Jerusalem actually with almost 300,000 Palestinians. They are included in the total official numbers of Palestinians or citizens of the state of Israel. But we are about 2 million and very young population. After 48, we have been living under a military regime. But we actually lost almost all our families and friends and homeland. So in my case, for example, my parents, my father's side have been raised in Haifa, labor family, and in the breakdown of violence during 48, the British men start to evacuate the British forces, but in parallel to evacuate also Palestinians from the city of Haifa. They offered transportation and boats to the Palestinians that want to run away from war. And actually we are the only group all over the history and the world that we should not run away during war period. If we run away during war, we don't have the right to return, which was a right that have been guaranteed to every war case. But in any case, my father's side, at least when they opened the doors after 2 weeks of shooting around their home and etc., they find that out of 70,000 Palestinians that have been living in Haifa before 48, only 2,000 stayed in the city of Haifa. So people start to look for their relatives, for their property and etc. And in most parts of the city of Haifa, Jewish immigrants have been located also on Arab citizens' houses. You can find until today families that their houses have been allocated also to Jewish families, and they live together immediately after 48. So until 66, we actually lived under military regime in Haifa and all over the Palestinian community from the Naqab to the Galilee, to the Up Galilee, to Tarshiha, and Sulta, to the but this evacuation of families didn't stop in 48 actually. We have the villages of Aqrith and Bir'in, two Christian villages that the authorities came to them already in 50 and 51 and offered them to move for a few weeks, to leave their villages for a few weeks because there is hostility activities around the border. They left and they never came back. They just go back as they haven't been allowed, but they go back only when they die. Most Palestinian families from Aqrith and Bir'in, they go back to the cemetery of the village. So as people that would like to live and to go back to that two villages, they are not allowed to go back, even when the Supreme Court took a decision to allow them, because it was military order and it was, after 48, the evacuation of this village haven't been in 48. But this scenario of evacuation villages and massacres and attacks against the Palestinian community took place later on also in 56. During the war of 56, the Israeli authorities did their best actually to evacuate all the triangle area by implementing a massacre on Kufr Qasim village. Kufr Qasim village is part of the triangle area, and the triangle area haven't been occupied in 48 actually. The triangle area have been given to Israel by the Jordanians as part of the ceasefire, Rhodes ceasefire agreement. So it haven't been occupied in 48 actually, and in 56 there was, in Rhodes agreement, there was Israel committed itself not to evacuate, to force evacuation of the Palestinians from Kufr Qasim village. But still, the massacre of 49 inhabitants of Kufr Qasim, workers, labor, people that came back from their jobs, the goal was to evacuate actually Kufr Qasim and the whole triangle villages around. But the lessons have been learned by us, and we took a decision not to leave our homeland, even if we will be killed. And that's why the triangle actually didn't run away. during this and following this massacre, and stayed in suffering, and the whole community actually since '56 was looking for ways to start to look for our families from the West Bank, Gaza, because in the Naqab area, most Bedouin communities that lived in the Naqab area have been either pushed to Gaza or to the Saudian borders or to the 67 borders to the West Bank. And the ones that stayed there have been concentrated in one area called siege area, and they concentrated them in certain area. So every group start to look for their relatives, because the connection of the Naqab is much more close to Gaza, to Sinai. So each group is more close. For example, people in Haifa have relatives in Jenin, and most refugees from Haifa went either to Jenin refugee camp or to Lebanon. Some of them through the boats, the British boats, went to Akka and later on to Lebanon. In the north, my mother's side, for example, went to Lebanon much more, and they have been coming back later on after '48 as a result of international pressure. So it took us a while to start to rebuild our existence and our institutions. For many years, we were not able to establish NGOs. Only in the late '80s, more and more brave people start to register NGOs. For many years, we used to have mainly committees. The Committee for Defense of the Land, لجنة الدفاع عن الأراضي. I was the head of the Arab Students Union in the universities, and it wasn't also registered, and the Arab Students Committee in Haifa University. So most political activism was either by political parties or by committees, but not by civil society organizations. Civil society organizations have to have the process to start the registration only in the '80s, and today you will find more and more NGOs that try to give services and try also to advocate for the rights of the Palestinian community in Israel. The '67 war actually enabled us to reunite with our Palestinian brothers and sisters from the first time. I have to say that we have been isolated, not only by the Israelis, but mainly by the Israelis, but also by the Arab regimes in there. The isolation of the Palestinian community in Israel, from one side we were called traitors because we stayed, and from the other side we have been called Arab Israelis. We are not Arab Israelis. We are Palestinians, Arabs, and citizens of the State of Israel. In this sense, our identity is very clear. And I saw, different group like International Crisis Group and etc. that dealt with the Palestinian community as community that have identity crisis. I think that we don't have identity crisis. We have a clash between our Palestinian identity and the nation-building identity that have been built since '48 by the Jewish people. Many people are not aware, but I don't think that the Jewish people are already clear what their identity is inside Israel. The whole process of building a nation, it's different than our case, because we had historical background and we had presence on the ground and etc. When you get Russian immigrants with immigrants from the US and immigrants from Ethiopia and other groups and from the Arab region area, you need to create a nation and you need to create identity. So in some cases, we saw how they try to take our hummus and our food and call it Israeli. Okay, in the end of the day, food and landscape and agriculture and language and etc. is something that is part of our identity, and our identity needed all over the years, and that's something that is very important to remember, because some people think that Mahmoud Darwish and Tawfiq Zayat and all the famous writers that contributed a lot to the nation building, to the whole struggle of the Palestinians, have been creative as a result also of this confrontation with the new Jewish nation that is built in Israel. You know, we needed to prove every day our identity for ourselves, and also in this meeting with the Jewish majority and the Jewish population, we need to say, سجل أنا عربي. And you know, I had this discussion also with some Arabs here in the US. People ask why it's so important for us to call ourselves Arabs and not only Palestinians, because it's part of the conflict that have been created since 48. We have been since 48 the face of the region, but at the same time, you know, no one in the region want to take responsibility also about our reality and our future. I think, you know, following 76, the Land Day and the Land Day confiscation, and the fact that we were able to prevent the confiscation of our lands in the Galilee in 76 in the Land Day, we started actually to breathe. And we started also to look for the region and also to contribute finally to this whole process of the struggle to liberate all our Palestinian people and sisters, you know, brothers and sisters all over. And this is very important because the whole vision of two-state solution actually started from 48, actually, from the Palestinians inside the Green Line. We came immediately after you know, certain points, especially after 67, the leadership of the Palestinian community in Israel said, let's go for two-state solution. And that was like the position of Tawfiq Zayyad, and even Mahmoud Darwish later on, even he left and he joined the PLO, but later on, he also promoted the agenda of two-state solution. And for most of us, we thought that self-determination of the Palestinians in a state near the Jewish, near Israel is the best available solution. After the implementation, the beginning of the implementation of this vision, the Oslo process, we understood that it's actually not the perfect solution for us. We, as a Palestinian citizens of the State of Israel, we understood already in October 2000 that there is a price for this two-state solution by isolating us from other Palestinians, building borders. Suddenly, to go to pray in Bethlehem, you need to get permission, or to go even to East Jerusalem and Haram al-Sharif, you need to prove that you are a Palestinian and you are Muslim. Suddenly you have a new reality that having been there since 67 actually, that we the Palestinians inside Israel have been divided from the other Palestinians. I have to say that the breakdown of the second Intifada it took place also in the Palestinian community inside Israel. 13 Arab citizens have been shot and killed during like 9 days in Al-Fahim, in Nazareth, in Saqin, in Arabi, in Jad, in all over the Palestinian community. The price was heavy price, hundreds of people that have been injured, 13 Arab citizens that have been shot and killed during demonstrations in the only democracy in the Middle East. And that was because we said no to Ehud Barak, that was supported by 95% of the voters already in 99 election. 95% of the Arab voters thought that Ehud Barak is better than Netanyahu. Remember, because we will come back to Netanyahu again later on. But 95% of the Palestinian citizens of the State of Israel supported Ehud Barak in prime minister as the candidate for a prime minister office, and he gained 56% of the voters. And we were very important actor in getting him the political majority he needed actually to create a government. Day after he created a government with Shas, with the ultra-Orthodox parties, and even with Meretz. And in October 2000, he didn't hesitate to send the police officers to kill 13 Arab citizens. Immediately after these events, there was a political crisis again in Israel, and in 2001, in the election of 2001, we sent Ehud Barak home and Sharon was elected. And it's very important to remember because we have some kind of a deja vu today. Today we have Bennett and Lapid in the government, and we have Mike Netanyahu is not there for at least meanwhile, okay? That's what was the case in 97. 97, Netanyahu was elected. After Rabin was killed, Netanyahu was elected. And in '99, we gave the majority to Ehud Barak. Today, the United Arab List, one of the political parties that is affiliated with the Islamic movement, actually gave again the majority to Bennett government. Without the United Arab List, there will be no 61 seats to create a government by Bennett, and we would have either Netanyahu there for another 2-3 years or another election round. You have to remember, 4 election rounds have been in 2 years. So in this sense, we are in a situation similar to the situation of 99, 97, and we are looking for the best ways to be effective. So what are the challenges of the Palestinian community today? I said, a little bit of history, but I would like to hit on the issues that are related to the reality today. The first issue, of course, is the occupation. For everybody in the community. Some people, especially in some political parties, think that Lapid will deliver. It's the way that people thought that also Ehud Barak will deliver two-state solution or some kind of a peace. So occupation, Sheikh Jarrah, the last breakdown of violence on May, the background was Sheikh Jarrah and the efforts of the Netanyahu government to evacuate Sheikh Jarrah families, and later on he incited and he motivated settlers groups to attack the Arab community, the Palestinian community in the mixed cities like Haifa and Akka and Lit and Ramli, and these are the cities that have been targeted because Jews and Arabs are living in the same places, and it's possible to create more tensions in these areas, in these cities. And the price was heavy. We have like 2 people that have been killed. We had 2,500 that have been arrested. 450 people still face legal charges and legal procedures until today. I just have been called 2 days ago while I was here, another arrest, they have another round to arrest young people in Haifa. So in this sense, freedom of speech of the Palestinian community is not, if we go out and we want to impact regional process like the occupation, we are prevented. They will use every possible tool to try to get us back and to push us back and to prevent us to decide if it will be one state or 2 states. The second issue that we challenge is the police violence. Myself, I was a victim of police violence. We have since October 2000, we have 46 Arab citizens that have been shot and killed by police officers, and another 12 that have been killed by Jewish citizens. Only 2 cases, police officers were convicted. So, and one was jailed for 6 months, and the other one for 15. So it's very minor, and it reminds you in the African American violence, police violence against African American here in the US. The third issue that we are dealing with is the issue of evacuation of total villages in the Naqab area. Total villages. Al-Araqib village have been already evacuated, demolished more than 192 times. One village, Al-Araqib. And every week they have a special unit called Yoav that its job to evacuate families and villages from the Naqab. So Hiran also was almost evacuated. Hiran actually have been transferred for the third time. Every period they just move them from one area to another area. This time it will be the third time that this village will be evacuated again, or it was evacuated again, to Hura. So actually, we talk about 100,000 Palestinians that are living in the Naqab that still suffer from the fact that they are not recognized, they don't have water, they don't have sewage system, and we are in a struggle of recognition. The other issue that we are dealing with is home demolition in general. In general, the state of Israel, it's very unique democracy, control the land. 93% of the land in Israel is controlled by the state. Most land have been confiscated, of course. And they allocate the land to kibbutzim, mushavim, they take lands from the Bedouin community, they give it to would seem. So in this sense, this whole process of land purification still taking place, but they control also the planning. So you have the land administration and you have the planning authorities. The planning authorities actually is the one that take decision, how to promote planning, housing, industrial zones, housing projects, educational institutions. So anything that you want to do, you have to go back to the planning authorities. As a result of lack of planning and control the planning in the Arab community, we have almost 50,000 illegal houses in the Arab community today. This is like a huge number. And whenever they decide to eat the reality between Jews and Arabs and to create tensions with the Arab community, they go and destroy some houses. Some days in Qalansawa village, or in Sakhnin, or in Al-Fahim. This is like where they decide that it's time to create a little bit more tensions and confrontations with the Arab community. These are issues that we face. Of course, I will not talk much about the fact that until today, actually, the Secret Service intervene and control nomination of principals of schools. I studied education and sociology. I never dreamed to work as a teacher or as a political activist and a human rights defender. I have zero chance to be principal or to work in the education system, because the Secret Service intervene in these issues. And lately, not only yesterday and not only this year, for the last 12 years during Netanyahu period, illegal weapons have been smuggled to the Arab community and created internal crisis inside the Arab community. We are already this year with 100 people that have been killed by gangs all over the Arab community. And the Secret Service that control the nomination of teachers, control our mobiles, they listen to everything. Suddenly they are not able to fight crime, organized crime. So we have organized crime in the Arab community that everyone is suffering from, every village, every city is suffering from. That prevent us from being politically active on the core issues that I already mentioned. And by this, Netanyahu regime for almost 10 years thought that it's a way to control the community. Let them fight each other in the way that the South African apartheid regime did with the black South Africans during the apartheid regime. Let them, and they did it actually in the West Bank between 2002 and 2006. The same thing was done in the West Bank until Abu Mazen and the Palestinian Authority came and said, let's have this whole concept amni. Let's cooperate. But what we can offer them, what we will give Hamas to the Israelis, what actually the Palestinian community can give. The only reason why they use this strategy toward the Palestinian community and use this whole fawda, this whole mass and the gangs is to prevent us from being politically active as a community. And we are a community that have been active, and we were actually since 2015 actually, we were able also to unite ourselves. Imagine that Arabs are united in some place or etc. We were able to unite ourselves, and the joint list gained 13 seats. And the power of the voters have been very important, and that's something that we understood that already in 2001 in the boycott election in 2001, that the Arab voters can actually punish the political leadership, can punish the parties, and can give them a lot of power. And that's what happened already in 2019 and 2020 election. When they have been divided, they went down, the two political parties that represent the Arab community, they went down to 9 seats. When they have been united, they have been given 15 seats. When they have been divided again, they have been given only 10 seats. So in this sense, people think that like boycott is, why people in the US especially ask why people don't go and vote. It's not people that don't go and vote. Our community is very politically active, demonstrations and etc. But they use their vote also to push and to try to pressure and to try to express what they would love to see the political leadership doing. 4 minutes. I'm almost done, huh? 2 minutes? Okay. Which is 2 minutes, Khalid. Khalid can أقرب منك. In any case, I will try to summarize here. These are the challenges that are facing the Palestinian community inside Israel. We are here because we think that there's some opportunities with the new American president. I know that some of you are less, happy about, what may, or less, they have less expectations than us. We don't have huge expectations, but it's our responsibility with Khalid and Nabil and everybody here at this table to try to do our best to bring our voice to American decision makers in this point. It's very important to bring our voice to the Congress, to the Senate, to the White House, to the State Department, and of course to the media and to the public in the US, and to build allies that can work with us to try to bring to the table the needs and the expectations of the Palestinian Arab community for peace and equality. We saw the act, the Two-State Solution Act that have been presented lately in the Congress. And we saw the language there. In several places, guys, there is a Jewish state and self-determination of the Jews. Nothing about the fact that we are 20% of the population, and we want to see, in the two-state solution, we want to see ourselves. Otherwise, our reaction will be to complicate the reality. And that's exactly what Netanyahu wants. I think it's very important, and this is our message also here in the US. The Palestinian community in Israel is an actor, is a voter. We have the political power. We want to play. We want to be even the game changers in building new discourse between Palestinians and Jews. To be able to do that, we need American decision makers also to take us in consideration when they promote any kind of peaceful solution. That's our message to decision makers here. We met with a lot of friends around, and we hope that in the near future we will be able to bring our voice more and more. So if you have contacts, if you have ideas, and you can support us in doing that, we'll be more than happy. And Khalid, you already did that by giving us the stage, and Nabil, you did that. And I see here Jennifer that she came. She put together the first round of already in 2004. We did like the first outreach here, and today we have Suha that actually run the Friends of Musawa in New York, and we have institution. We have friends here, so please use our friends. Let's connect with Suha after this discussion, and we are here to stay until we will end our tragedy in the region. I hope that it will be 5 years and not another 70 years and not 3,000 years. In any case, thank you, and we are open for questions, and I hope that we will be able to cooperate on specific missions that as part of the long-term goal.
Thank you, Jafar. To add a few words to what you said, I think you should keep coming here. We should engage the Jewish community, because the last war in Gaza proved that there is a new wave in the young Jewish community in the US. I think many polls showed that 40% of American Jews, the young Jews, 40% call Israel apartheid, and 40% think Israel is apartheid. This is the new generation, 18 to 40 years old. I think 10, 15 years ago, Americans had the news about the conflict in the Middle East, watching CNN, Fox News, reading the New York Times, the Washington Post. Now, no one has monopoly over the news. I was watching Gaza being showed live on Twitter. So there is no monopoly, and I think the young crowd, the young new generation, do not need to turn the TV on to know what's going on around the world. Actually, there's a free access everywhere now. We get the truth, and you can get both point of views. In the past, the point of view presented to American public was really the pro-Israeli point of view. That monopoly doesn't exist anymore. So I think there is a change in the American public. There's a major change actually in political parties. majority of Democrats think Israel is committing war crimes. Still Republican Party, the ties with the Christian right and Sheldon Adelson and other donors and Fox News, in fact, it's continued to go in the right direction. So I think your job is very important, and I think many young Jews know what Israel is doing. Many people also don't realize because we don't tell the story the way we're supposed to. Israel frequently demolish homes in Jerusalem, and then they go on CNN or the press and they say, oh, they didn't have a permit. If you know that Israel provided permit in Jerusalem, 104 permits since 1967, versus tens of thousands of permits to Jews. Palestinians cannot get permit to build anything. And the population of Jerusalem, Palestinians of Jerusalem, the number went up to 3 times, from 120,000 to almost 350,000, and still have to live in the same small homes. And they cannot expand or build an extra room or build an additional room in the house because typically they don't get the permit, while Israel is building thousands and thousands of settlements on stolen Palestinian land. I mean, the issue of Sheikh Jarrah was entirely based on that those Palestinians living there since 1948 didn't have the title to the land. While the title, my father's house was in Haifa. If I come with the title, would they give me back the land? Of course not. The title is only enforced on Palestinians, never enforced with Jews, and you probably know better. So there's 2 tiers of discrimination. I mean, people in the West Bank have absolutely no rights. Palestinians, citizens of Israel, have some right or have the right to election, but I would like to ask you a question. How many appointments in the government that Palestinians get? And it's important to know that Palestinians are Christians and Muslims, so discrimination is applying to both. I have many Republican friends who have no clue there's Christian Palestinians. And those guys went to college and they think 100% of Palestinians are Muslims. What's the percentage of Christian Palestinians?
The Christian Palestinians about 11%, and the Druze community is also about 10%.
Yeah, so discrimination applies across the board to all religions, and this is something important. I think you should tell them that story.
Yeah, the Christian community is actually also about 11%, and if you look at governmental nominations, we promoted in, it was I think 96 legislation for fair employment of Arabs in governmental offices. But since 96, the law haven't been implemented. So the last reports talk about 10% Arabs, about 10.5% Arab citizens that are part of the governmental offices in low levels mainly, not as directors, not in the senior levels. So in this sense, we have been actually as a result of Musawa advocacy work and other human rights organizations and the promotion of legislation, in 96, 95, 94, there was a possible to promote some laws, equality laws. So this law had been approved in 96, I think, and the level that the percentage of Arab workers, staffers in governmental offices was about 5%, 5.5%. And still, almost how many years? Almost more than 20 years, we are still less than our percentage. We are about 10.5%.
I've always wanted to say.
Can you state your name and your affiliation?
Please? Peter Humphrey, I'm an intelligence analyst. I've always wanted to say to Israel, there's a somewhat different birth rate amongst you guys and the Palestinian folks. And it doesn't take a mathematical genius to do a projection which says you keep this quasi-unified state in one piece by hook or by crook, and you're going to be outnumbered by the end of the century. So the two-state solution is highly important to you, and the sooner the better. And I don't know, I think we could make that case, whisper into our Israeli friends, that this is definitely in their interest, to say nothing of the fact that their number one trading partner will be independent Palestine. Second thing, I'm wondering, the one force that sometimes stands up for you guys occasionally is the Israeli courts. And I feel that you are definitely underutilizing that channel. And I wonder what could be done to file a suit every day if you have to, because statistically you're going to win a few of them. Finally, question. Seems that the Palestinian Christians, you mentioned, are pretty much leaning with the Palestinians rather than with the Israelis. That's intriguing. I wonder if it's true both in the territories and within the Israel itself.
Thank you.
Okay, I would take the court question. The courts in Israel is actually the nomination of the political leadership. And the last 20 years, Netanyahu and the right wing is actually doing their best to nominate judges, but so-called conservative or right-wing judges, and also you have now settler, I think 2 settlers actually that have been nominated in the Supreme Court. So the historical liberal Supreme Court is not there anymore, and for the last 10 years, actually, almost every Israeli government request to violate human rights have been approved by the government, from home demolition to the citizenship law to the Jewish nation state law. You know, the citizenship law have been approved in 2003 as temporary law. This is a law that prevents spouses of Palestinians from the West Bank that are married to Palestinians from inside Israel to get citizenship and live together as family. So this law actually intervened in family unification. And any Jew anywhere that would like to become citizen of the state of Israel and get citizenship, he can do that already in the airport. You don't need to make process. But here in the citizenship law, when it comes to the Palestinian citizens of the state of Israel, there is a process that will take 5 years. So they prevented even that by temporary law. They said, we need it for security reasons. Okay, 1 year, 2 years. In 2006, the court said it's temporary law, guys. So let's keep it. It's security need. And they kept extending this law until this year. 18 years as temporary law for security reasons. There was no security reasons, of course. It's demographic, and it's connected to your first question. I don't think that the illusion that have been presented internationally that Israel with like 6 million Jews and etc. We are not doing kids to change the demographic balance. This is not our attitude. And actually, there is today inside the Palestinian community in Israel law. It's like similar to the Jewish, how it's called, the birth. It's similar today to the Jews in Israel. But the illusion that the Jewish Israelis are living in Cyprus and not inside the Middle East, and they don't have Arab neighbors and Palestinians, and the way that they count, we will count only the citizens of the state of Israel, but cross the border, which green line, nobody's, there is walls now, but every settler can go and come back, so nobody count the settler, but nobody also count the Palestinians. So the settler would go and live in the occupied territories, but when it comes to count how many Palestinians are living in the West Bank, for example, they are not there at all. So it's not part of the demography. Israel, and this is part of what we would like to tell everyone everywhere, okay? The Jewish people decision to build a state in the middle of the Middle East means that they are part of the Arab region, point. There is 500, 600 million Arabs and 10 million Jews. This is the balance, actually. And there is no question of like demography. We will have a border here, illusion of border. There's no border, okay? And then we will count this amount of people, and everybody else we just forget them. How you do this? It's a very unique situation that have been created. So I don't think that you should take it seriously, and we don't compete with them on number of kids.
You're anti-two-state.
And for the, what was the last question?
You're anti-two-state.
No, I didn't say that I am anti-two-state. I would say it everywhere. Everywhere. The Palestinian community, the majority of the Palestinian community inside Israel is still in favor of two-state solution. We know that the Israeli government is not interested in implementing two-state solution. They don't want, and that's why they keep building settlements. And they keep saying, we want two-state solution. I don't think that they want two-state solution. I think that the international community should hold Israel responsible for the failure of the two-state solution. They should not hold us responsible for the failure of the self-determination of both nations in two states. If anybody is responsible, is Netanyahu and Bennett and Lapid and the Israeli governments that keep building settlements, keep building walls, and keep implementing occupation on millions and isolation and discrimination on us. And that's very important because we don't want anybody international to hold us responsible after years of struggle to recognize the right of the Palestinians for self-determination, to hold us responsible for the failure of the two-state solution vision as a result of the Israeli government. They are responsible and they should be held responsible for that. What was the third question? That's it?
Christians.
Christians. Christian Palestinians are Palestinians. Historically, if you come to Haifa, and you will see that there was al-Masjid, wal-Knesset, wal-Knis, the three Christians, Muslims, and Jews used to pray in Haifa, in my city. And I can take you to places in Wadi Salib, in the old neighborhoods, and show you where people lived together and they used to have a respect to each other. So the Christian community, some of the Christian community and immigrate in very high percentage, unfortunately, but the Christian community feel as part of the national forces in all over the Arab region, and specifically, of course, in Palestine. And of course, Christian Palestinians are part of the national organizations of the Palestinian community inside Israel.
Jafar himself is Christian. Sure. Questions?
You still have questions, Jennifer?
Hold on. My name is Jennifer Allah. I used to work for Jaffa 17 and 16 years ago.
So
Ali, do you have a microphone?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, please.
Shall I continue?
Yeah, please.
Jafar, I'm curious. Also, my family's from Ikrit. If you have questions about Ikrit, I'm happy to answer them. Thanks to Jafar, I got to put something into the State Department Human Rights Report about Ikrit 17 years ago. My question is about the Middle East Partnership for Peace Act, Nida Lawi, that was just passed last year. Regardless of community viewpoints, this act is moving forward. And it has two aspects to it: economic partnerships between Israeli and Palestinian businesses, and this partnership for peace and peace-building activities. I'm curious your opinion about this act and how it could be positively implemented to support the Palestinian community in Israel, or what negative aspects exist for vis-a-vis our community and this act, and in particular within the context of the Gulf and normalization. It's an easy question.
Yeah, that is.
Thank you.
Okay, you are aware of the Peace Act? Okay, it's initiative of OLMEP. It's a network of the Israeli peace organizations to promote actually specific allocation for peace organization or peace building projects by the American administration. Actually, I think it's about time to share the $3 billion, to give 20% of the $3 billion to the Palestinian Arab community in Israel. I think 3.8. I think it's, imagine, the American administration give Israel for destruction and war 3.8. And when it comes to peace building, it's 50 million. And it's after lobbying and a lot of work that have been done by peace organizations, Jewish peace organizations, most of them, that promoted this legislation. But this is the way that I think we should tackle this whole issue. The question why we need 3.8 billion for destruction and war and only 50 million for peace building and people-to-people programs. And yes, the Palestinian community in Israel deserve to get 20% of the 3.8 and not in military aid. In development and closing the state budget allocation, like Israel discriminate us. Israel allocated less than 5% of the development budget of the state of Israel to the Arab cities and villages. This created huge gaps in infrastructure, just in poverty. Almost 55% of the Palestinian community in Israel is living under the poverty line also today. I mentioned the issue of underutilized villages and the housing problems and etc. So in this sense, if anything should be done, on parallel to peace building, one, to get more investments in peace building and serious peace building, not normalization of occupation. And two, if the US is interested in investing really in Israel, should give at least 20% of the American support to give it to the Palestinian community to close the gaps that have been created by the Israeli government. But I will add to that we always consider our friends in the peace movement in Israel as allies, but still we have a lot of disagreements with them. And I think part of this disagreement that we think that we are core of the peace movement in Israel. We are the core of peace movement because we are Palestinians and we are citizens and we know what both nations, both groups would like to see as future for, when Asmahan, my wife, worked as a nurse and in clinics and physicians, Arab physicians that work, almost 20% of the physicians in hospitals today are medical teams, are Palestinian medical teams. They treat, and part of them are the best, of course. And 40% of the people that graduated last year as a physicians, not only from Israel, all over 40% are Palestinians. That's like a very important power, a very important status when you treat Jews and Palestinians. You have also, of course, the expectations, and people treat you in this way. So in this sense, when we look at what was done in the last since this whole Peace Act started by the EU and by member states and also by the Americans, I think there is a lot to do to improve the way that any peace actions will be taken, because some of these projects, especially during Trump period, have been much more a normalization with the Arab regime without solving the core issue, which is the occupation and discrimination. So in this sense, we have also to guide American decision makers and the administration that the funding that is allocated for peace building should take in consideration that we are looking for real peace that will end the occupation, build trust between communities, make reconciliation, and deal with the core issues like refugees and other issues. And that's something that is not done today according to the guidelines of this act today.
Thank you. Other questions?
Hello, my name is Omar Kalboni. My question is, I know that 20% or 25% of the Jewish population is Arab Jews, and they usually vote for either right-wing politicians or they support extreme policies or measures against Palestinians. And I'm wondering why that sentiment. Do you think it's because they feel maybe disconnected or pushed out of their Arab lands that they vote for these extreme scenarios or measures against Palestinians? That sort of they take it out, their anger, they take it out on Palestinians that are Arab. I'm just curious about that.
Actually, it's a combination. Of course, the situation of most people in the whole Arab region wasn't perfect and still not perfect, and people suffer. If they are Jews or Christians or Muslims, all people in different countries, and the situation and even the situation in the last few years have become worse than in the 40s. They have been abused. To convince them to come to Israel, they have been abused. And in some cases, part of the solidarity of some Arab nations have been also violent toward some of them. And we know that from both sides. Some Yemeni people told us what happened in Yemen. Some people, some people in other countries told us, as a result of solidarity, to show solidarity with us as Palestinians, they pushed out our big part of this Jewish immigrants that came later on to Israel. I had this conversation once with some Arab activists, and they told us that they reacted to the Nakba in 48, and in the way that they reacted, they created another wave of immigrants to Israel, or Jewish immigrants from these countries to Israel. I told them, thank you, now we have to deal with that. But that's one part. The other part, actually, and that's, I think, will be new for you, for most internationals, that the affiliation of the Arab community with what's so-called left in Israel, historically left, Mapai especially, is something that created crisis, created mistrust and rift between us and these immigrants. The fact that these immigrants have been humiliated in the 50s and the 60s by the elite Mapai, by the white elite Ashkenaz that led Israel and established European Jews, that created actually rift between the Mapai and the left, the Labour Party today, it's called Meretz and etc., and these communities. And in 77, actually, for the first time, they were brave to say goodbye. We are not willing anymore to vote for the typical left. The typical left, Mapai, used to control us and them in the voting day, in the election day, by different ways that they used to push even Palestinians to vote for the Labour Party or for Mapai, also in the 50s and the 60s, to force the people of Uqbaz and Ber'im, after they have been evacuated and their village have been destroyed. People thought that they will vote for Mapai and they will go back to their village. So they blackmailed people for years. And they did that also with the Mizrahi community. We call them the Mizrahi community. What happened later is that, especially in the 90s, they said, go to your friends in the Labour Party. You Arabs and Palestinians have this love story with what's so-called left in Israel, so we will be in the right wing and we will be against you. So this whole affiliation of the Arab community with the left today make part of the rift between us and the Mizrahi community. Why I'm telling you all these details, because part of what we are doing in the last 5-6 years is to ask ourselves, okay, strategically, where we should invest also our future investments, what we should do. And when we did analysis of the Jewish population, who is the Jewish population, and why people vote like what, why Mizrahi voters vote for right-wing parties. So we saw these two reasons, and we have to deal with them. So for the future, we are dealing with the Russian community, the Palestinian community in Israel. We are dealing with the Russian immigrants, we are dealing with the Ethiopian immigrants, we are dealing with the Mizrahi, not all of them as one group. Because we understand that it's mosaic and each group has its background and have its motivation. And we have to deal and to build strategies to try to convince them that in the end of the day, living with us, it's the future, the only future that they have to decide, and they have to find the political platforms to do so. Today, there is no political platforms that represent them.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Yes, hi. My name is Nasser Sadi. How do you see the Abraham Accords to be a hindrance, or do you think it's an opportunity for it?
No, I don't think that it's an opportunity. I think it's part of the destruction that have been done again and again by Arab regimes since 48 and before 48. It starts from 29 to 36, and going on with what happened in 48. But in any case, I don't accuse any Arab regime anymore. That's it. I know that part of the roots of our tragedy is related also to the policies that have been implemented all over the years by different Arab regimes. We, the Palestinians, have to find a way to solve our tragedy with the Jewish population. Point. That's our responsibility. We should not wait for anybody to help us, and we should not expect anybody else to work instead of us. We have to take the full responsibility. We have to struggle for our rights, and we have to liberate the Jews from this occupation and isolation mentality that has been implemented on our region since 48. That's our responsibility, and any regime like Europeans or Arab regimes can do whatever they want. In the end, it's our responsibility to convince the Jews that we are the partners for peace, and that's it. And they will have to do it as soon as possible.
Okay, well, Shafar, I want to thank you. I think you have another engagement you have to run. You have to grab some lunch. I thank our audience for being here, and thank you very much, and we'll see you in the future. And thank you, Bassam and Man and Ali, for your help, and Ben. Thank you.
It's not just thank you. Thank you like this. Really, thank you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.